Hey, what's up, y'all? In today's video, I'm going to tell you about the single card that helped me turn my first $3,000 purchase into over six figures in sales in 2025. I'm Drew from Curly Bear Cards, and before I get into that story, I want to tell you a little bit about what I'm hoping this channel will be. I want this to be a bit of a diary of my Pokemon journey, whether it's collecting or running a business, and also a little bit about the psychology behind both of those things. Professionally, I'm a neuroscientist and I've been in the field for about 10 years. Currently, I'm a 7th year PhD student. And I've always been fascinated with why people do things. And Pokemon is so full of that. It's decision making, it's risk, it's biases, it's incentives, collecting behavior, all sorts of interesting things around business psychology. And this channel is meant to be a record of how I think about navigating all of these different things, both as a collector and a business, all of the different complex variables that go into making my own decisions, and what I've learned from my many mistakes and what my decision-making process is like going into the future, whether it works out or not. I'm also a bit of a personal finance nerd, and Pokemon has kind of been a real-world lab for taking all of these different personal finance principles and weaving it into a collecting journey and a business journey. And I've had to think a lot about how to operate this business and collection in a way that is sustainable, gratifying, and profitable. So my story in Pokemon is a lot like a lot of other people. I am the traditional sort of young kid during the 1999-2000 boom. And I literally learned to read because of Pokemon. I had a poster of the original 151 on the back of my door, and I used to stand behind it and just kind of sound out the names until they stuck. And I had Pokemon Blue that I would play, and in order to play the game, I had to learn to read. So Pokemon's really been with me for a long time. But then I did what most people do. I moved on. I grew up and did other things. And fortunately, I kept all of my old stuff, which disappeared into my parents' attic, and I basically left Pokemon for a couple of decades. I think the last packs I opened were in Sandstorm because I found my old Armaldo holo from that set. So now let's fast forward a couple of decades. I wasn't here for the 2020 boom, but I remember hearing some whispers about it online. It was probably in the middle of 2022 that my parents ended up finding all of my Pokemon cards in the attic while they were cleaning things out. And it was literally this Ziploc bag full of raw cards with rubber bands around them. So they were all beat up, but going through them really brought me back and pulled me right back in. And that's where I found the card that I think changed a lot of things. I found this. This is a Shadowless Charizard from my childhood binder that graded a 1, very poetically because it is beat, and I probably played with it on the concrete during recess when we used to play the TCG. And at the time, I didn't even understand what Shadowless even meant. I didn't know anything about the variants or the symbols or the print runs or any of it. And so at that point, I did what I think I've done as a scientist for my whole life. I kicked my brain into the gear and I treated it like a research project. I just wanted to know everything about these cards. So then for months after that, I didn't buy anything. I just sort of immersed myself into the information that was online and on YouTube, trying to learn how the sets work again and how rarity works and how to comp cards and where to buy cards even, and what actually drives value in these cards, because I really did not know anything. And that's really where the Shadowless cards grabbed me, which I had multiple of besides this Charizard. Because as many of you guys probably already know, just as a quick recap, English base set has a few different versions. You have first edition, Shadowless, and the unlimited run with, the drop shadow. And Shadowless was really interesting to me because I learned that for a long time, people weren't really clear on where it came from. It kind of showed up around the first edition, a little bit after maybe, had the same design minus the stamp. And people really debated like how it was produced and distributed. And I thought that was fascinating, that we could have a version of the card that wasn't super clear how it came about, and I found that research process very gratifying. And as people sort of piece together, you can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but as far as I understand, these were sheets that were produced at the same time as first edition, but some of these sheets were chosen to get the first edition stamp, and then some of them were not. And then eventually, once they realized the popularity of Pokemon, they had to make a new unlimited run with the Drop Shadow. And one thing that was super interesting about shadowless cards is they're really, really hard to grade. And presumably this is because when they were being produced, the WotC at the time was picking the sheets to give the first edition stamp that looks the best. You can see this in the pop reports. For example, the Shadowless Charizard has about half the number of 10s as the first edition Charizard. And I just thought that was such a fascinating sort of history around this variant and this set. And that mystery, that history, the little design differences and trying to figure out how did this happen, that was the rabbit hole. And it really taught me something very important to how my approach has been in the hobby, is that if you understand what you're looking at and why it matters, you'll end up making better decisions. And that doesn't mean you'll make perfect decisions, but you'll be equipped with more knowledge than you would if you don't take the time to understand what things are and why you want to buy certain things or what the market looks like for certain things. I was instantly hooked after this, and as a grad student with little disposable income, I knew that I had to make my collecting sustainable if I wanted to participate. So I just learned as much as I possibly could. I spent hundreds of hours on YouTube watching a backlog of collecting content, business content, figuring out how to sell in order to fund my collection. And I realized that I thought running a business in this space would be both gratifying and potentially profitable. And I bought almost nothing during this time, probably maybe a couple $100 worth of things, because frankly, I didn't want to make a mistake that I couldn't afford. So let's fast forward about a year after I found my collection. It's the middle of 2023, and I'm actually out of town visiting my partner's family for Father's Day. And one night I decided to whip open Facebook Marketplace to look at what was around. And I saw someone post a collection. And in that collection, there were a bunch of Shadowless cards, which I had at that point kind of fallen in love with, and a bunch of Japanese Versus Series cards that I had never seen but looked so cool. That's a story for another video. What a great set. But I saw that they looked really clean, and something sort of clicked in my head. And if I hadn't spent all of those months learning about Shadowless and then falling down the Versus Series rabbit hole, and falling in love with the stories behind these cards and realizing what makes things valuable, or thinking more carefully about what makes things valuable, I might have just scrolled right past it. And if I didn't spend the hours researching, understanding grading, or trying to understand grading from the outside, and learning from other business owners, I may not have had the confidence to send a message. But again, in that moment, something clicked. I sensed the opportunity, and I knew that that was the moment that I needed to take the plunge. So that night, I spent too many hours putting together a spreadsheet. I looked at recent sales of all of the top hits in the lot, looking at the key cards, the rough totals of what everything might be worth. And it certainly wasn't perfect and took me way too long, but I sent a spreadsheet and my offer to this seller in the hopes that my transparency would be a selling point, and I knew I just did not want to miss this. So fortunately they accepted, and the next morning on our drive back home from our visit, I picked up the collection for $3,000. So after bringing that collection home, I decided to take the plunge with grading and sent a bunch of things from that collection in, along with some things from my personal collection, to try to learn the ropes a little bit. And out of that came my first ever graded card, and it was this. It was a Shadowless Charizard, but this one ended up grading a 9. And that moment mattered a lot more than I think a lot of people would admit. It wasn't just about getting the grade or the value. It was the signal that I had put in the work, and the work was paying off. And it gave me the confidence to keep going. It gave me confidence to try sourcing more, to grade more, to learn more, and build this repeatable system that I thought could be sustainable. And to this day, grading is the primary part of my business. So I clearly didn't even end up selling this card, so the monetary value wasn't really the most impactful thing for me. It was this concrete evidence that pursuing knowledge and having, frankly, humility in your ignorance and trying to address that is the thing that will provide insight and spur actions in the moments that matter most. Now, I want to be clear, I can't ascribe full responsibility to myself for the success in that moment. There was a ton of luck involved. There was luck that I saw that listing. There was luck that I was even in that area at the time. There was luck that the cards were as nice as they looked in the pictures, and luck that the grades came back good on that Charizard and good enough in the other cards that I sent in from that collection that helped me get the snowball rolling. But I think the real lesson from all of this is that old cliche, is that luck is when preparation meets opportunity. Luck and serendipity are everywhere in our lives. They're very real, but your preparation is what determines whether or not you can capitalize on that luck or not. Opportunities show up for everyone. You just have to be able to recognize them, move quickly, and have the knowledge to understand what your downside risks are if you want to take the swing. So those months that I spent learning and studying, instead of just buying impulsively or following the instructions of the first YouTube channels I watched online, that's what really made it possible for me to act when the right moment showed up. And that's really why this card mattered to me and helped me bring myself to where I am today. It was not just the value, it was the fact that it helped solidify a mindset for me that created confidence in my process that has now shaped everything that I've done thereafter. But I'm not advocating for you to sit on your hands or watch from the sidelines, waiting the stars to align before you act. Because experience really is the best teacher. And if you are too scared to act, you may end up just watching opportunities pass you by. But the importance of curiosity and the desire to understand why, in my experience, has been instrumental and cannot be understated. And with that upfront work, when things inevitably go wrong and you do make mistakes, the more knowledgeable you are about the things that you're engaging in will let you more accurately diagnose what went wrong, why it went wrong, and what you can do in the future to do better. Of course, you also have to have the insight to understand your capacity and tolerance for risk so that you know which opportunities are worth taking for you specifically, but that's going to be a topic for another video that I'm hoping to make soon. So that's the story of the Shadowless Charizard. It was a card that changed everything for me, really. It was both the beginning of my Pokemon journey back when I was a kid and also served as the starting gun for my business today. So on this channel, I'm going to try to share more of the experiences, what I've learned, the mistakes I've made along the way, how I think about the intersection of collectible markets, business, and psychology, and discussing my efforts to run my business in an effective and durable way that I personally find gratifying. So if that all sounds interesting to you, or greatly appreciate a like and subscribe, and comment what card pulled you back into the hobby, or an experience or card that has shaped the way that you think about your collecting or your business today. I think that these very early experiences can really shape how we show up as both collectors and businesses long after we have those experiences. I'm also going to put my Instagram and my email down in the description below, so if you have any questions, comments, or just want to drop a line and say hi, feel free to do so. So I'll see you all on the next one. Thanks.